All right, Mayor Candell, it's 6 o'clock and you're live on YouTube.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. And I want to call this meeting of the Lafayette Equity and Inclusion Task Force to order on March 31st, 2021. And first, I'd like a roll call. And we can say that it's Vice Mayor Geringer and I here for City Council. And do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Great. And I'll second. And Vice Mayor Geringer?
Aye.
And I am also an aye, so it is unanimous. We'll adopt the agenda. So now it's time for public comment for items not on the agenda. So if you have something to say that you would like to express to this group that is not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand or press *9 on your phone if you can't raise your hand on the Zoom call.
Okay, we'll give folks a moment to do that. And doesn't appear that there are any public comments, Mayor Candell.
Okay, great. So I'll close public comment and go to item 5, an update from the police chief on the public safety recommendations.
Okay, Chief Aldrich is joining the meeting now.
Good evening. Waiting for the picture to come up. Can you at least
Great,
hear me?
welcome. I can hear you.
Okay. Camera's on. Hopefully, let's give it one more second.
There, I see it.
There we go. Okay. Good evening. I'd like to give you a quick update from the Public Safety Subcommittee recommendations that were submitted to the council last year in response to a lot of the topics that is relevant to this task force. Coming out of last year, city manager and I have worked together to look for ways to improve the service that we provide as your police department. And we proposed recommendations to the city council back in July. And I'd just like to give you an update on that. Out of the recommendations, there was 5 categories: oversight, transparency, mental health, city oversight, and training. In regards to oversight and transparency, was moving to quarterly updates from the police department to both the Public Safety Subcommittee and to the City Council. The goal of moving from an annual to a quarterly update was to allow for more opportunities for members of the public and members of the City Council to look at the statistical data, updates from the chief, and ask questions that may have come up in the last quarter that people may not feel comfortable to bring up in a one-on-one setting, but might be able to feel more comfortable to do in a city council setting, and also give the opportunity to city council members to publicly engage with the police chief. In regards to number 3, mental health, I will defer that to our city manager, Narup Saravatsa, here shortly, but what I will say is the police chiefs have been very excited about what our city managers are doing in conjunction with county health. We always use the analogy of the toolbox, and having more tools in the toolbox is very helpful. For law enforcement, a 5150 hold and potentially limited services is the only option. And having more options for us to get the services that are needed to the right people is always a win. It all comes down to public service, public safety. And jail or some other route may not be the right route for you. And if it's a mental health, we need to get you the right folks. I would like to just give a little update on that. We did discuss this last year in regard to the number of mental health calls that we do get in Lafayette. And I can tell you for 2020, again, the best way I can capture that is with the number of people that were actually placed on the 5150 hold. There are a lot of other calls for service, a suspicious person, a welfare check that could be mental health related, but don't meet the criteria that's necessary for our state Welfare and Institutions Code 5150. But in 2020, we did have 65 5150 holds placed on folks by your police department. Out of the 65, we used force 2 of the times, and both of them were what we call physical force, where basically the person did not want to get in the ambulance, did not want to get help, and we had to physically restrain them using control holds to get them the help they need. No other tools off our tool belt were used, i.e. a taser, baton, fist, a gun, etc. It was physical force utilizing control holds to safely get that person to the help they need. So I'm really proud of that stat. Our officers work hard when we have a 5150 to use the minimum force, if hopefully no force, right? But we got to get the folks the help they need. And by the time we get there, they're in such a crisis that they need assistance to get to where they need to go. And one case was a family member calling us, asking us to come help. And another case was a gentleman who was acting aggressively towards people passing his vehicle. But I think what the county health department and what our city managers are working on, I'm really excited about it. And I can tell you that I'm not the only one in law enforcement that are excited about it. In regards to city oversight, in the event that we ever have an internal affairs complaint that is filed by a citizen in our community or from without our community, but involves Lafayette Police Department, the city manager and I will continue to be in communication from the beginning to the end of that. And we have implemented that already, and we'll continue to do so in the future. In regards to training, I know we spent a lot of time on this last year, so I won't take too much time. But your Lafayette police officers through the sheriff's office do receive training in the areas of crisis intervention, de-escalation, implicit bias, and cultural and racial diversity. A lot of these courses are already required by POST or California POST, which is your police officer standards and training. Anything that our legislature, either through an assembly bill or Senate bill enacts, gets incorporated through POST. And so if your state officials require additional training in any area to include these areas, the sheriff's office will provide those updates along with the ongoing training that we already do. But in response to last year and understanding that there's always room to do more, back in December, we hosted an additional course for our Lafayette officers specifically, from me on down to the patrol officer, all attended. And it was on implicit bias, de-escalation, and racial cultural diversity. One of the benefits we have at Lafayette as a contract city with the sheriff's office is that we're able to provide a lot of additional training in a lot of areas. For example, active shooter training to investigations training that may go beyond what we typically can get. And Lafayette, historically, for the last several decades, has always prioritized making sure Lafayette officers have the highest level of training possible. And the way I view this is just another area where can we do better? And if we can, let's just excel at it. And we've had the support of our city council in the past in the training dollars that go with that. And I appreciate that. And we'll continue to look for opportunities in these areas. And that is my update for tonight. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Actually, I do. Thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the update. So just for people who might not understand what exactly a 5150 is,
Yeah.
can you just kind of go over the range of what that involves?
Absolutely. 5150, the really easy way to describe it is where we determine that you're at risk to harm yourself or others due to your mental health at the time. And this allows us to put you on a hold and get you transported to the county hospital where you'll be evaluated by a doctor there. That hold lasts for a maximum of 72 hours, but can be a lot less. The doctor determines they can give appropriate treatment or release that person, they can do that. So really the tenets are you're at risk to harming yourself and or others. And if you don't mind, I forgot one other thing to add on. A lot of questions came up last year about tracking data in regards to contacts law enforcement has with people based on age, race, gender, a myriad of factors. And we gave some explanations last year on the law that was enacted in 2016. And what I can tell you is the sheriff's office, based on the size of our department, was required underneath this law to begin gathering data in 2021. So the first RIPA report, and I always blank out on the acronym, that you'll see from the sheriff's office, which will include your Lafayette officers, will be produced in, I think it's the first quarter of 2022 by the State Department of Justice. And so for those that have asked, do you guys collect the data? What does that data look like? There was an assembly bill that was passed back in 2016, and the sheriff's office, based on the law, began collecting that data in January of 2021. So the first RIPA report that I could give to the city council will come out in that first quarter of 2022. So that data is being collected currently.
How hard is that? Is that cumbersome? Is it, is the reporting feel really different, or is it just a little bit more paperwork?
It takes a little more time. The nice part is I did this a long time ago when I worked for the California Highway Patrol in the early 2000s. We actually had to do the bubble sheets. Now we have it all automated. It's on a computer system. It does take additional time, but like anything else, as you get used to a program or anything like that, it really comes quickly, and basically requires the officer to document every contact they have throughout a day, specific to the reason for the contact and then the outcome of the contact, along with those descriptors I mentioned earlier: race, age, gender, etc.
Thank you. I didn't know it was going to be that soon, and I'm glad. I think that's good. Anyways, does anybody else have any questions? Teresa, Vice Mayor Geringer.
I do. First of all, thank you, Chief, for being here with us tonight and for attending the meeting last week, the Diversity Information Night. I think that it is important that we show that we're doing this work and we're also doing it in collaboration. So I do appreciate you being here. And maybe you said this as you started with the 2020 data on the number of 5150s, and great that for the most part there wasn't use of force. Is that significantly higher, the same, or compared to previous years?
So this is data that I hadn't individually pulled out until last year.
Okay.
We started having a lot of discussions about mental health and police response. So compared to last year, off the top of my head, I believe we had 63. And out of those, we used force 2.4% of the time. And in each instance where force was used, it was that, hey, you got to get in the ambulance. I don't want to get in the ambulance. You got to get in the ambulance. And at some point, we had to put hands on, and we classify that as physical force, where we had to use a control hold or physically touch you and move you to where we need you to go, whether this would apply to an arrest or this would apply to someone who needs to get in the ambulance and go get the help they need. So as far as data, I could be happy to look that up going further back, but what I do have is 2019 and 2020 data.
And so they're pretty similar, actually,
Yeah.
down just a little bit. So I was curious also from the impact of, just the pandemic on mental health, and, not just as it relates to police services. So that was my only question. Thank you for.
Yeah, so the numbers are fairly similar, off two from one year to the next. We had a few cases in 2020 that were unique, I think, specific to COVID and being locked in at home, and not, especially for some of our younger generation, not having that normal socialization they would have in high school. So we had a few unique cases of that nature, but as far as data points go, it's fairly consistent between the 2 years.
Great, thank you. That was all the questions for now. Thanks.
All right. So thank you. I guess it's time for public comment. If anybody has any questions or comments for Chief Ben, please raise your hand or press *9.
And we don't have any hands raised right now. We'll give folks another couple of seconds. Now let me see here. We do have one hand. Let me see if I can find who it is. There we go. Okay, Nick Warnoff joining the meeting now.
Good evening. Hi. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I actually live in the adjacent city of Orinda, but I am probably in Lafayette as a consumer 3 to 5 days a week. And in terms of the data that the police department keeps and tracks, what I would be most interested in is information about if you're a sports fan, you sometimes read an article that says, "Where are they now?" And what I would be interested in is with respect to the criminals who have been apprehended committing crimes in Orinda, if there could be some kind of update from time to time about where they are now. Are they back out on the street? Are they in the Martinez jail? Are they in the state prison system? That would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So do we keep track? Is that something that we typically would report on, or is that protected in any way? Or I'm just trying to get an idea.
It is not something we typically track. I know that a variety of academic institutions or that are related to that study do that. From a law enforcement perspective, you just really would require another department within any agency to really effectively track it. I think it's a very interesting field, and it is a field that has been researched quite often by a variety of different groups to say, for example, drug-related cases, was jail the right place for this person to go? They went to jail for being addicted to a drug. Where are they now? And so I think it encompasses a variety of topics of what the criminal justice system looks like, what is being effective, meeting what our expectation. Is it rehabilitation? Is it lock you away forever, et cetera? And so the answer is no, we don't track that data specifically, but there are other institutions out there that I know have made academic studies of that topic.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more public comment?
No public comment at this time.
All right, so thank you, Ben. And I'm very glad to hear that you're supportive of what Nirup is going to talk about. That actually makes me really happy to know. And it sounds like the police officers in general, the sheriffs, hopefully are as supportive as we are.
No, I can tell you, I'll just wrap up with this. Again, we go back to the toolbox analogy. The toolbox has changed over time, but in a lot of areas, it really has never expanded on what law enforcement can do at the time, right? We contact you at 10 p.m. on a Monday night. What can we offer you? Where can we take you? Is it simply to take you to BART and get you a ride home? Is it they can actually get you the service they need? And then there's the additional component of folks that will refuse those services, but if they're offered in a different format, potentially they'll accept them. And really, I'd say the different format is the follow-up. At 10 o'clock at night, you're like, I'm good. I don't want to go here. But if a team can go out and meet you the following day and say, here, let me really explain what we can offer you, maybe those folks will accept it at that time versus 10 o'clock at night from a cop on the side of the street. And
Yes.
I've had a couple different instances in the last 3 months where we had a juvenile who ran away, and where could we put her for the night as her family came to get her? And I won't go into the details of this topic, but there were very limited resources for us to access besides having her hang out with us at the police department. And so resources are always valuable, as we all know. And I will tell you that cops on the street love having additional tools in the toolbox, whether it's for mental health, drug treatment, et cetera. And so there's not a police chief in this county that's not in support of what Nirup's going to talk about. So, and I just want to follow up. This came up last year. People have talked about, if I don't feel comfortable talking to the chief or the police department and I have a concern, and where can I go talk to? And I just remind those that are on the call, if you don't feel comfortable coming to me or a sergeant, you've got the city council, you've got the city manager. And I can promise you this, if you reach out to our mayor, vice mayor, and all the other council members, they do follow up with me and ask questions. So if it's not me you want to talk to, but you want an answer to something, there are other avenues out there, and encourage folks to use those.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you, Ben. I agree. Thank you. All right, so we will move on to the next topic, which is the update on the Contra Costa County Mental Health Initiative. It's our very own city manager, Nirup Srivatsa.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor. Good evening, everyone. This is an an undertaking that no one would have thought of this time last year. 2020 has changed a lot of things, and some for the better. And I believe that this effort is one of the better ones. I'm going to share my screen and give you a quick overview of the work that's being undertaken. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And from the beginning, terrific. Unfortunately, you can see the second slide, but it's okay. In late summer of last year, there was really a movement in all the cities in Contra, Costa to examine the way the county as a whole delivers services in the behavioral health arena. And the Contra Costa Public Managers Association in July authorized the creation of a public managers subcommittee to work with Contra Costa Health Services to examine the way we offer services on the county level and to come up with solutions. And this gave, and the reason is that behavioral health issues are in the forefront. I mean, the statistics are troubling. 1 in 5 adults in our county experience behavioral health issues. Mental health or behavioral health calls they're the third most common calls that the emergency services gets. And last year in Contra Costa County, between 10 and 11,000 people were placed on involuntary psychiatric holds. And so the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference really directed the public managers to look at this as a regional collaborative effort of all the 19 cities and towns in Contra Costa, as well as the county. We created a subcommittee, and I'm fortunate to serve on that subcommittee. And we started by looking at all the models throughout the country, whether it's the CAHOOTS model, which is very popular in Eugene, Oregon, the CIT model from Arizona. We took a look at everything, and we also looked at what the county had to offer at the present time. And the county does have a variety of services. There are 3 types of behavioral health crisis teams that operate throughout the county. And the county offers other services, including homeless services, but it is a system that is not uniformly available to everyone and at all times. And so there are lots of gaps in the system. And the first thing that the County Health Services Department did, and they were the lead, and they continue to be the lead in this effort, was to assemble a team of stakeholders. And so in addition to the public managers, there are several city and county employees who are working on this effort in addition to their regular jobs. We had community advocates, people who have lived through the experience of being part of this system in Contra Costa. As the first step, the county embarked on what's called a value stream mapping, and essentially looking at the services offered right from the time the person picks up the phone and calls for help to the time that they are taken to an evaluation center, maybe to the hospital, and maybe discharged, and all the follow-up services. Every aspect of the behavioral health system in the county was taken apart and examined by teams of volunteers. And this was a 1 to 2 week process. It was very in-depth. And they started off with pre-crisis to see how many services were offered so that a person did not have to pick up the phone and call for help. They talked to the 911 dispatchers. They talked to the ambulance drivers. They went into the hospitals and the emergency rooms. And as a result of this effort, after breaking down the system and analyzing it and understanding that we don't currently have a county-wide system that's available, the team came up with this very ambitious but very noble statement that anyone in Contra Costa County can access timely and appropriate behavioral health crisis services anywhere, anytime. So imagine a system where 24/7, 365, all the community members in Contra Costa would be supported by a robust, compassionate behavioral health system. So starting with that ambitious goal, the 4 key priorities that came out of the value stream mapping were that every city operates as a kind of an autonomous unit and has its own police department, maybe its own dispatch. But to have a county-wide single phone number was felt to be a very important part of the solution. The second was to have a mobile response team of qualified personnel available 24/7, and that this crisis team would be comprised of non-police personnel with the ability to draw upon the assistance of police personnel when needed, and that the county psychiatric center would not be, and the emergency centers would not be the only destinations that people would be taken to, but there would be more localized centers where community members would have access to those localized centers. So at the very moment, in fact, this week, what's exciting is that 3 of the 4 ideas, the priorities, are being tested. And that is, there are teams that are testing the single phone number idea. They are working with dispatchers, understanding the challenges, understanding how various police departments can feed into the single phone number. They're also they are tracking 5150 calls to see and sending out mobile crisis teams to assist the police or to substitute the police response. And this has been going on from Monday. Every evening we have a debriefing from the teams. And this Friday at 2:00, and I invite everyone to participate, the county will be reporting out on the findings of their, what they call the rapid improvement exercises. And they will be coming up with further solutions on how to implement these ideas. So as we stand today, we are going to be conducting 3 rapid improvement exercises into May. So we're going to be testing and retesting these ideas, and then identifying pilot projects and embarking on a pilot study to make sure that this laudable, noble idea can be implemented successfully. We've also started looking at funding, because this is not an inexpensive undertaking. The good news is that our assembly member has introduced a bill identifying 988 as perhaps the single mental health crisis number for the county and for the region, which is great. Congressman de Saulnier has reached out and solicited applications for grant fundings for mental health initiatives, and we are taking advantage of that. The American Rescue Plan Act from the federal government does allocate money for mental health initiatives, and so we're fully engaged in seeking funds from that source as well. And we hope to come back to the Mayor's Conference in June to really report back on all the progress that's been made, come up with a set of recommendations, and also start to really start funding. Because at the end of the day, it will be a county-wide initiative, and all county jurisdictions will be asked to participate financially. So that's where we are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Can you take your presentation? Thank you. Oh, this is good news. Things are actually happening, it sounds like, getting off the floor with the number and the rapid response teams. So with the funding, I've got a couple questions and then a comment, but with the funding, so I saw the application for the grant funding. Do we have any idea how much money is available? And then also with the American Rescue Plan Act, do you have any idea, the amounts? Are they small? Are they big? Just swagging.
I don't.
Okay.
Don't, but I will definitely find out.
Sounds great. Thank you, Assemblymember Rebecca Barkahan. Is it thought that number, I'm hoping it passes. I mean, it has to go through the legislature for 988. Is it intended to go statewide? It seems like that would be something that it is, right? It's not just, maybe it starts here, but then goes statewide, which would be absolutely ideal. And then I just kind of want to say on a personal note, when my mother was failing near the end of her life, I had to call and do a 5150 on my own mother. And because she had deteriorated to a place where we couldn't handle her anymore. And any improvement over the dog and pony show, which is what I called it, which I was warned that I knew was going to happen as soon as I picked up that phone. This was a 90-year-old woman, that needed some mental health experts and didn't need the police and the fire truck and the ambulance and it was such an inappropriate response for something that should have been, a better way. And so I personally thank you. If we can get help for those people that have to call on family members. I called a friend of mine to get advice from her because she had already had to call on her son who was, experiencing some, and she said, it's the dog and pony show, but at least call your doctor. And maybe you don't have to go to county health. You can go to John Muir and go to her own doctor, right? But that was the only improvement that I could make. And so this one sounds like it's so much in the right direction. So I thank you so much for getting this off the ground.
Well, thank you, Mayor's Contra Costa Mayor's Conference. I mean, you started it. We're implementing it.
Appreciate it. So any other questions? Vice Mayor Geringer.
Comment. Thank you, Mayor, for sharing that story. And I've seen this presentation and heard the presentation, and every time I'm just how much has been accomplished in less than a year. I think the way that you started out with it, Nirup, is that it came out of necessity, out of a number of very tragic things that happened. And one of the things out of the pandemic that through these collaborative partnerships, we're going to see real change and real action in a relatively short period of time. And I don't know what the total amounts are on the grants, but I know that there's a lot of work at the county level as well to make sure that funding comes in for this effort and for this program. And then, as Nirup also pointed out, we all have to be prepared that on a city by city basis, we're going to have to also look at the value of this in terms of our budget and funding going forward. And I imagine that, we'll be very supportive, but it is a reality that it's going to take additional funds. So thank you, Nirup, for leading the charge with us and for serving on that committee.
My pleasure. I also wanted to mention that the county's Measure X funds can also be used for this purpose.
Which one was Measure X? Remind me again.
It was a sales tax increase from last year.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right. That goes to county mental health. That's right.
Yeah.
To the The county hospital. Oh, that's right.
And public safety and fire and all kind. And the committee will be, the Measure X advisory committee will be appointed on Tuesday, next Tuesday, at a special Board of Supervisors meeting. They're going to have another one. The members have been selected and they'll be appointed. So that work will begin as well.
That's great. Great. Oh, wonderful. All right. So time for public comment. So do we have any hands up for public comment?
We do. Jeremy Levine has raised his hand. I'll be bringing him into the meeting, but just want to remind folks to use raise hand function or *9 if you do have public comment. Jeremy Levine is joining the meeting now.
Howdy, y'all. Good
Hello.
to see you today. I really appreciate the presentations from Chief Aldrich and City Manager Srivatsa. I think that it's great, the moves that the county is making and the police department is making toward non-punitive health restorative interventions rather than focusing totally on punitive models. And so it's really good to hear that kind of progress is being made. I actually wasn't planning to talk today, but I am calling in because even though there's this really incredible work being done, and I didn't know about any of it, so it's really awesome to hear. I am a little worried that we are 36 minutes into a meeting of the Equity and Inclusion Task Force, and I don't think I've actually heard anyone mention equity or inclusion or connect how these really important policies relate to equity and inclusion. That's really what it's about, right? Providing services that really make people feel safe and really make people safe. And because of that lack of emphasis, I'm a little concerned that maybe in implementing these really important and wonderful measures, we're not necessarily getting all of the input that would help us implement the most effective measures, whatever they may be. So pardon me if people talked about this and I just missed it, but I'm curious, what kinds of mechanisms does the police department, the county health and this coalition of cities and their governments, what mechanisms do they have in place to listen to the communities that these measures are really supposed to be helping? What input and give and take is there from stakeholders of who are diverse and coming from different backgrounds? That's my question. Again, thank you for having this meeting. It's the presentations were really great, and I'm really impressed by what's going on. But that was just one thing I wanted to bring up.
No, excellent. Go ahead. Yes, please.
Jeremy, you raise a very good point, and I take responsibility. I'm so steeped into this program that I should have zoomed out and talked about why. And the reason why the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference brought this up and made it a top priority was because we don't have a compassionate way of delivering behavioral health services. As the mayor indicated through her own personal example, we need an alternative to a police officer coming to your door when there's a mental health crisis call. And in many cases, the police officer comes there only because there's no other alternative. We don't have a 24/7 mobile crisis response team. And as far as the whole process goes, people who have had lived experiences, people who have been part of the mental health system in Contra Costa, who have experienced what it is to be served by the system, are fully involved in the value stream mapping and in the rapid improvement exercises. It's not just the county and city staff. There are nonprofit organizations and people who have lived experience. So it's a very collaborative process that listens to the people who are the clients or the customers of the system.
Right. And I agree. I'm sorry, my fault too, for not coming back and going out. So we have these a three-legged effort in Lafayette with equity and inclusion. And one is the community equity inclusion that this city task force is doing. The other through our city is through our public safety committee. And that is the police, and knowing that typically people of color are far more incarcerated and are in contact and have police contact, in our city more than disproportionately in the population. After being emphasized with the death of George Floyd and everything that went on, that is a huge part of our three-legged approach in our city for equity and inclusion. And so the police safety and this new mental health, which was actually being pushed very hard by Tawn Hall, who's Miles Hall's mother, in Walnut Creek. And I know that she's been involved and is with Rebecca Barakahan getting the 988 going as well. And so that is where the equity and inclusion piece is front and center. And so that hopefully that helps why. So the third piece in our city is being handled by our schools, and that's the parents and our school kids. So yeah, sorry, I should probably put that at the top of every agenda item. and then when we talk about things, reference to which piece of the puzzle this is being what the effort is being thrust forward by. So thank you, Jeremy, for making us look back and go and wide and explain why we're doing this today. So hopefully that is good. Are there any more public comments?
Yes, Mayor Kendall. Libby Henry has her hand raised, and we'll remind folks if they do want to provide public comment to use raise hand or *9. Libby Henry's joining the meeting now.
Hi.
Hello.
I don't know why my computer takes a while to kick in.
Everybody's does, yeah.
You kind of just answered. I was going to comment on what Jeremy just said, and I was going to say my immediate reaction. Unfortunately, I did join the meeting late, so I didn't hear the entire presentation or anything. But when you were talking about mental health, I thought of Michael Hall immediately, and apparently that was mentioned earlier. And I said, there is a whole, piece of this puzzle that has to do with mental health. So I think it ties in perfectly. It's another preconception or whatever. And so I think the mental health definitely needs to be a part of this. I did want to ask, I don't see it on the agenda. By the way, for anybody who's interested, the George Floyd trial is going on this week. Anyway, you mentioned about schools, and see that is where, and I've talked a little bit to Nairoop about this, where I think that a lot of focus should be made as far as, I'm thinking of a lot of things that I did with my kids throughout the years in teaching at the 5th grade level, which I think is a great place to start, actually, as far as different kinds of diversity programs. I did multicultural events with the school. I mean, of course, that could also extend to the community at large. I don't know. Like I said, I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting. I was on another meeting. So I don't know if you covered that or has that been at all discussed before. I just wanted to know. Because I would definitely be interested in helping with that, help develop a curriculum or whatever we think is appropriate.
All right, and we've hit 3 minutes here.
Oh, so Libby, yeah, the schools, Richard Whitmore came on to the meeting, the last meeting last week, and presented the efforts that they are working on, and they are really terrific. And so you would have to probably reach out with the schools. Most often those kind of school programs are being handled by the parents and not so much by the community, but you can definitely, you know, try to email and reach out to them and see what you can do to help out. All right, any more? Public comment?
No public comment at this time, Mayor Kendall. Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry, a hand has just gone up. So let me remind folks, if you do wish to, just so it goes a little smoother, if you do wish to provide public comment, go ahead and put your hands up all together at once, and we'll take you one by one. And you can use the raise your hand or *9. With that said, Deborah Callister is joining the meeting now.
Hi, I wasn't planning on talking, but I want to thank you all for this incredible meeting and for the new resources you're exploring and the needs you're trying to meet. I just wanted to add a couple items. I'm a member of NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, excuse me, and they're an incredible resource for anyone struggling with mental illness and or loved ones with mental illness. And I just wanted to also add that I learned about a new nonprofit called Seneca. I was walking along School Street and witnessed a crisis with a young man who was having a difficult time, obviously, with the transition due to COVID, you know, going from home to school. And it was really troubling. And I called NAMI and asked, or actually I called the mobile crisis team in the county, and they said, oh, well, if it's somebody under 18 years old, you need to call Seneca. So I called Seneca, and they were incredible. They were a nonprofit based out of Oakland, I believe, who's just there as a resource for people who may have loved ones who are struggling with COVID transitions and school concerns. And they just were going to contact Stanley Middle School and say, hey, you know, somebody witnessed something in the community that was triggering and thought that it would be good for us to give you a call and let you know we exist. So there are resources out there, and it's a matter of us all connecting among one another. But thank you so much, Manager of the City, Srivastava, for your work on this effort. Really appreciate it. And also Mayor Kendall and Vice Mayor Geringer, thank you for your efforts. And Chief of Police also.
Yes, thank you. That's a great resource. I had not heard of it. Vice Mayor Geringer.
So on NAMI, thank you, Deborah. And on NAMI, they are the stakeholders that are very involved in the county. Gigi Crowder, the executive director for the county, is very involved in this work as well. And on Seneca, I know that Seneca has had a longstanding relationship with the school district, and particularly the executive director there and former principal Fred Brill were very involved. But this reminds me that maybe circling back around and making sure those connections are still there as people transition out. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Wonderful. All right, so thank you. Thank you all. We will close this topic, and now we move on to the next one. So thank you so much, Naroop, again, for everything you're doing. So move on to the next item is about anti-Asian violence, and we will bring on Angie Zehner.
Hello.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
Hey. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Can you?
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for inviting me. I actually have a PowerPoint presentation to share. So how do I do that?
I think you can just share your content.
Share screen.
There's a share screen button at the bottom. There you go.
Can you guys see it now?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Angie Ziener. I am a resident of Lafayette. I've been here since 2011. And I really love the city and love our community. I have 3 children that go to Lafayette schools. And, so thank you, Susan, for inviting me to speak about, anti-Asian violence that, really has been the top of mind for many of us as, news and media has really surfaced a lot of the crimes that's been happening against this particular community. Maybe just a little bit about why Susan has invited me. I actually have a degree in Asian American Studies from the University of California at Berkeley. So way back when, it was really the first ethnic studies curriculum in the country that it was established at Berkeley. Was very proud to have really formal education on Asian American studies, and it was really grouped under ethnic studies, where we really had to take a look at all the ethnic groups within the United States that and their issues and really their intersections. So had done a lot of work in the community in San Francisco and Oakland, et cetera, way back then, and I have continuously worked with Asian American organizations. So, and yeah, I'm really truly encouraged by the level of activity and awareness around diversity and inclusion in our community. I participated last week in the Equity and Inclusion meeting that Susan hosted. I think, Teresa, you were there as well. It was a great meeting. So there's a lot of activities, and I know the schools have also been doing a great amount of work in this area. So very encouraged by the amount of work that's being done both nationally and locally around this issue. I know that we are talking about this topic in a, in a sad time, because all this just awakening around Asian American violence, anti-Asian violence, this has been going on for a long, long time if you look at history, and I'll go over that a little bit. But unfortunately, this is not new to our community. This has been going on. It's often underreported. Actually, I was just scrolling through my phone and looking at the recent news. It does, in fact, say that Asian American hate crimes are the ones that are highly underreported on a national level. And the fact that I think I'm also really encouraged is people are reporting it now. We finally have some statistics around it, and it's really being highlighted in the news as well. We don't want to see this type of violence, but I think the reporting is very encouraging. So at least we're aware. So before I came into this meeting, I really wanted to think about what can I provide as information to the city and to the city council. I think we're at the beginning stages of really thinking about what we can do. So I hope that this presentation is really helpful. Some of the information might be super basic, but I wanted to really highlight, gather some research on what Asian American community and organizations have been doing, what they've been highlighting to others that are interested. So that's really what this presentation will be about. Let's see here. So I wanted to show you, and on the screen it's a Times cover that was published in April. And this is a beautiful cover by a woman named Amanda Fidrohaipakia. And really her quote about this particular art piece is, "With softness and power," she calls it, "reflects the immeasurable strength of Asian American women who are the connective tissue of our communities, yet too often overlooked, fetishized, dehumanized, and underestimated." And her statement with this piece of art is to say, my hope is to see the beauty of our people reflected in the colors of our communities in a dignified and respectful way. And of course, as you guys know, this is really came at the heels of the shootings in Atlanta. So So with that, I just wanted to first highlight some of the anti-Asian violence and crime that has been going on. So the COVID-19 pandemic has fueled much of this anti-Asian, sorry, I have to move this, and xenophobia. Approximately over 3,000, almost 4,000 incidents have been received by Stop AAPI, which is an organization that established this platform for people to report anti-Asian hate crimes since March 19 of 2020 to about February. So we're talking 4,000 crimes across incidences across the United States. So the reported crimes, and I'm sure you guys have read in the news, they include verbal harassment, physical assaults, such as murder, shoving, being spat on was a really common one, vandalism, and then also civil violations. So I want to talk a little bit about vandalism. There's been a tremendous increase in vandalism of Asian-owned businesses across the United States, in Oakland, in San Francisco, in New York Chinatown, civil rights violations, workplace discrimination, refusal of service, and really other instances such as online harassment and other total instances. What I also want to say about the 4,000 incidences, or approximately 4,000 instances, half of them occurred in California. So it could be because of the larger population in California, but it's really disproportionate happening in California too. And also, women are twice as likely to be impacted by hate crimes and these instances than men. So those are some of the very specific stats. So as you guys know, in January, a gentleman by Vicha, he's 84-year-old gentleman, was walking for a morning walk in his San Francisco neighborhood, and a surveillance camera captured a man running full speed and smashing his body onto the pavement. So that really was one of the instances that captured a lot of attention in social media, was distributed. And then on March 16th, as you guys know, a mass shooter in Atlanta killed 8 people. 6 of them were Asian women. That also sparked a lot of anger and fear in the Asian American community. Hours before the Atlanta shooting, a 77-year-old man was violently attacked in Oakland, and in San Francisco, a 64-year-old man was stabbed in the face, and a 60-year-old man was pushed over and left partially blind. So I'm just kind of drawing some examples of what's been reported. On March 8th, an 18-year-old Asian woman was violently struck and choked in New York City. A 26-year-old Asian woman was called slurs and sexually assaulted. And so I just wanted to bring up really the color and the essence of these attacks that give you some example of what the community has been experiencing. So, you know, I just don't want to talk about these things without really, I think in the work of bringing the voices of people of color in diversity and inclusion work, one of the most important thing is to just bring the voices of people of color forward and really highlight the impact of what this means psychologically. We talked about mental health. We talked about all sorts of issues that communities like this experience. I mean, I know that we live in Lafayette and maybe we say to ourselves, well, this doesn't happen here, but crimes like this, especially if you belong to a targeted community, does have an impact. And I just want to bring forth some of the voices of Asian Americans and how they have experienced this crime. A woman had said, oh, this is all actually from the AAJC website that captures all the violent crimes. And they had people submit their stories. So these are some of the quotes that I lifted from that website. I think that people pick violence, verbal violence, and physical violence because they don't expect us to react at all. They're used to us keeping a low profile. So this is Actually, I lifted this up because I think it's really a belief about Asian American communities that's widespread, which is that we're docile, we won't react, and we are just targets, right? You have seen recently, there's been a lot of attack on the elderlies and the fragile. But I think Asian American community as a whole is seen to be not be active and don't react, don't confront, right? Another thing is about feeling invisible, right? So this is a quote from a parent. My 11-year-old daughter came home crying from school repeatedly because children in her class said they hope COVID will go back to China and kill all the Chinese people. They also said that Chinese people are dirty, lying cheaters who can't be trusted. I reported it to the school administration and never even got a response to my email asking for support. We have never felt so invisible. So again, I wanted to lift this up because I say reporting is important, and also acknowledgement of these types of incidences. It's important for the community to feel like they're not invisible and to be responded to, and also really the third part is feeling safe in the community, right? If you're not just being heard, you feel invisible. So I know that this is a theme across many topics that we talk about when we talk about, people of color and our experiences. This one's kind of long. I'll just kind of skim through it. No way out and no one willing to intervene. So I think this came out of New York. I was taking the subway home from the airport when a white man not wearing a mask started verbally harassing me. He started singing about America, continuing saying, "Get out of my country, go back to where you came from, and thanks for killing us," etc., etc. So this person also said he went to look for help and there was no response, and he felt very unsafe in his situation. Again, another kind of testament to feeling invisible, feeling unsafe, feeling like there is no one around to help. This last one is about stereotyping. This is a really big and deep issue. I think you guys have all heard of the model minority myth and how that impacts the community. And, so stereotypes, as we all know, really hurt the community, and it really kind of takes away from our the uniqueness as an individual and the uniqueness within the ethnicities that are actually represented in the Asian American as a group, AAPI as a group. So I'll read this one. My town is predominantly white area, which is sort of like where we live, right? And I'm one of the few Asian American students attending my school. It's disheartening to me, the normalization of racism towards Asians. Even my close friends often make stereotypical racist jokes regarding my eyes, food, and academics. The other day, phrases such as, "So you're Asian, do you eat dogs?" made an appearance on a call with a friend. When I confronted them about their racism, they replied, "Stop being so sensitive, it's just a joke." I am sick and tired of these so-called jokes. They were never funny and never will be, and they're only shallow and insensitive. I'm tired of being seen only for stereotypes. I want to highlight this because I know what's close to me is children's experiences in the schools. And I don't know if this is happening either at a large scale or even at very micro, we'll call microaggressions, but it does impact the sense of lack of individuality and also, a sense of otherness, which the Asian American community talks about quite a bit. Either it be expressed through violence, through microaggression, the whole idea of always feeling like you are an other is really prevailing in the Asian American community. So this is really highlighting it from a child, right, who's experiencing this very early on in life. Asian American discrimination, what I want to say about this is I want to bring this up because I think this is really historical facts that are really important for us to understand. In the United States, Americans have been long considered as a threat to the nation, and they're called yellow pearl, unclean and unfit for citizenships in America. They have long been a threat. Sorry, I have, there's a typo there in the first paragraph. So really some facts, Asian Americans began in large numbers migration during the gold rush. So really the experience of Asian Americans in America began in California. And they began coming during the gold rush in the 1840s to 1855. Now, this is probably the most important point about all this is in immigration legislation, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, prohibiting all immigration of Chinese laborers, and the Page Act of 1875, which banned Chinese women from integrating to the United States, remains the only law in the United States to have been implemented to prevent members of a specific ethnic group or natural group from immigrating to the United States. So this is the one immigration law which no longer exists that has been implemented to exclude one group, and specifically is written into it Chinese immigration. So of course, I mean, the other thing I want to highlight, which really impacted the history of California, is the Japanese internment. This is an order issued by President Roosevelt in 1942, which authorized the evacuation of all personnel deemed a threat to national security. And then, so in the next 6 months, over 100,000 men, women, children of Japanese ancestry were moved to assembly centers or internment camp. This is really important to highlight because this is recent, is really targeted at one ethnic group, the Japanese, and it's really ripping the livelihood of many, many families. Again, another kind of national legislation targeted Asian Americans. So there's been a history of this. And I think when you read this, what's surprising to me is a lot of this impacted the population in California. So this is very California kind of centric experiences. So what I wanted to do in this next piece is, you heard some quotes about children saying, I don't want to be stereotyped. Please don't think about us the same way. When I actually studied the statistics of Asian Americans, and this is really important, I think, for anyone doing the work with Asian American communities, that the statistics that represent Asian Americans, if you look deeply, really does not support the model minority myth, okay? And let me just go over some of this information. So the Asian AAPI community is diverse and highly bifurcated in a lot of factors, such as higher education attainment, economics, et cetera, et cetera. So bifurcated meaning there is a group within the Asian American group that is on this side of the bell curve, and there are a few that are on the other side of the bell curve. So we're bifurcated. We're actually, Asian Americans are probably the most bifurcated group in America for all sorts of factors. So the other thing that is really important to highlight is a lot of the I think over 59% of Asian Americans are foreign born as of right now. So if you kind of think about the issues of immigration and just coming to America, whatever all those kind of policies are, that's what confronts most of the Asian American population. This is another, I think, statistic that's really important is a record of 20 million Asian Americans trace their roots to more than 20 countries in East and Southeast Asia. We're talking, when I looked at the map, the way we kind of classify Asian Americans, and this is actually not including Pacific Islanders, but Asian Americans, it spans across kind of like 3 Americas across the globe and top and down. So it's really a huge geographic area where people are coming from. And so you can imagine the histories, the cultures, and the languages that when you talk about AAPI, what we represent. Again, when I talk about bifurcation, I'm not going to read all this in detail. There's a huge disparity between income levels, education achievement, likely to live in poverty, and home ownership. So there is a perception, right? If you kind of think about the model minority myth is Asian Americans are doing well. They're high income earners. They go to the Ivy League schools, and they're overrepresented in some of the higher educations, et cetera, et cetera. That is actually, if you go in deeper in the statistics, is not quite true if you break them down into ethnic groups. I have more data, and actually all this data comes from the Pew Research. So if you guys want more information on this, it's really important to recognize that stereotypes just do not work. And stereotypes just are not representative. They're hurtful when said, right? And they're not representative. They take away from our uniqueness. Okay, so I also went and did some research and I don't want to speak for myself, so I really wanted to go and do some research on what are the national and local issues that organizations that have been working in Asian American issues, with Asian American communities, what have they been working on? So we all know that there's a national movement. President Biden, I think this is from March 30th, so very recent, we established an expand initiative, he has an initiative to initial mandate to coordinate across all federal agencies to combat anti-Asian bias and violence. So this is really great news. There's an establishment of the Department of Justice cross-agency initiative to address anti-Asian violence. So there's just a lot of work going on at the executive level on this issue. So when I look across many organizations, which I will list later on what they're working on, some of the top issues that are particularly impactful to the Asian American community is, of course, Asian American hate, which we had talked about. Census. We're often misrepresented in the census or underrepresented in census. So there was a huge effort to elicit volunteers to call Asian American families to participate in the census and make sure that they're represented correctly. Immigration and immigration rights. Again, 59% of Asian Americans in the United States are foreign born. So immigration remains an issue and a topic for the community. Media diversity, I think this, especially with the Atlanta shooting, there are organizations that has really tried to work on media diversification and the representation of Asian Americans in things like movies, right? Voting rights, legal and policy advocacy, racial justice, language barriers. This is a huge one. So I was doing work with one of the organizations that really looked at during COVID, what was the healthcare and healthcare access barriers in terms of COVID information, which was changing all the time. How are the Asian American communities accessing this? We're talking, are we translating this information? Are we able to present this in a way that's not just online, because many of them perhaps do not have online access. So these are some of the top issues. Of course, it's national as well as local. So really, towards the end of my presentation, I want this to be more of a discussion, and I hope I've presented enough to pique your interest and provide some foundation for the work that we might do as a city. I think this is just some of the quotes that I've lifted from some of the organizations. We want to be recognized for the diversity in our community, in your daily interactions or in your official capacity, right? Avoid using generalizations and aggregated facts to describe the Asian American community. I can't emphasize this more. Look deeper, because we're not one size fits all. Accept that our community continues to feel like outsiders. Consider the needs of AAPI communities in diversity and inclusion work. I think that is really important. Elevate the issues of hate crimes. Provide community resources in support of AAPI communities. I think the next one is really important. Promote inter-community and interracial dialogue. So again, I applaud the council and the city for including a specific section to talk about what's confronting Asian American communities in our diversity inclusion dialogue, right? So this is the first step. Education, I have been in communication with the DEI group that's working in schools. Is like, how can we help people understand the history of Asian Americans? Like some of the stats that I've highlighted. Discrimination against Asian American has been a fabric of this country, especially in California. So it's something that is continuing and it's being expressed in other ways now. But again, we have inherited a history of discrimination against Asian Americans, right? And in that sense, we're not foreigners, right? Rather, we're part of this country. So, and then lastly, really with all things that I'm sure all folks that are really conscious around diversity and inclusion are talking about is donate, volunteer, stay active, and do what you can to elevate the discussion. Oops. So here we go. This is the last part of my presentation. I just highlighted some of the organizations that I have worked with that I know of personally around. There are thousands of others that you can probably do searches on. So the Pew Research Institute has that de-aggregated data on Asian Americans, which I lifted. I wanted to pull out the picture that I got from the internet where when the Oakland violence started happening, Compassion in Oakland put together this volunteer program for volunteers. So, you know, teenagers and all sorts of people from all walks of life volunteer to escort elderlies in the Asian American community so that they're not fearful to walk out on the streets, right? Asian Americans Advancing Justice is a national organization, is really an umbrella organization of many different groups across the country that works on policy issues. So for example, one of our local organizations is the San Francisco Asian American Law Caucus. Stop AAPI Hate. All the stats around hate crime have been that I reported in this presentation. You can see those. You can see the press releases. This is the group that has been gathering those. And really, if you read any newspaper article about Asian American hate crime, they do reference AAPI statistics and really all the anecdotal story that comes from that. The Asian American Journalists Association had made a stance against Asian American hate. They are working on really some great stuff as well, changing really the media representation of the crime against Asians. Act to Change is really actually a cool organization that is formed to educate students on bullying and specifically in Asian towards Asians. Hollaback is an organization that actually many people have participated. It's called Bystander Education. What do you do when you see someone about to attack someone? What do you do as a person standing by? I attended one of those trainings. It's fantastic. Support them. Attend one of their trainings. And again, like I said, there are thousands of organizations. These are just some of the highlights that I'm providing. And I have another link that has a list of 10, 20 Asian American organizations across the board. So with that was that's my presentation. I hope that was helpful.
That was, wow, thank you. That was, Angie, wow, appreciate it. The amount of work you put into that, it shows, and it was really helpful to educate all of us about what's going on, and very much appreciate it. So I just have a couple quick questions. So why do you think that these crimes are underreported? Is there a reason why?
Yeah,
why?
I think there has been one of the reasons that there's a language barrier for reporting. I mean, I can't see my mother who would go and call the police and say, somebody spat on me on the train, So I think there's language barriers. I think that's one of the biggest ones. And, and also the feeling. So the quotes really elevate. I don't think anyone's going to listen to me. So who cares, right? So there's a lot of that sentiment in the Asian American community, for sure.
Okay, well, I get that. So was the little girl that reported, that wasn't in Lafayette, none of the stories you had there. Okay, I'm like, oh gosh, I just wanted to make sure. So just as swag, maybe Nirup, what percentage of our population would be considered to be a part of the AAPI community?
11%.
Thank you very much, Angie. All right, so 11% of our residents.
Yeah, we do have a pretty large population, and I looked into the school stats as well. Our schools are also, Teresa, maybe I think it's about 11% Asian American identified, and I don't know if that includes mixed race children as well. The percentage of Asian American in the United States is about 5%, I think. Yeah. So.
Okay. And then why do you think
right
that the Asians are underrepresented in the census?
I have to look into that issue, but I know one of the reasons, language barriers and not participating in the census is always a huge one. So if you kind of look at the work that actually I was asked to volunteer, but it's just to call them. If you pick up the phone, if you speak that language. We're talking Vietnamese, we're talking Mog, right? We're talking, I don't speak any of those, but we need volunteers to pick up the phone and talk to them about the importance of census.
Right.
To participate. You get the postcard in your mail, you don't know what to do with it if it's not in your language. So, part of the problem, like I said, was there are 20 different ethnic groups at least, right? That the 20 is, how do you reach 20 different, and they're majority foreign born. So how do you reach them? Access and reach is a huge issue.
Got it. Wow. Appreciate this. And thank you. We have had an incident, just to let people know that we did have, somewhat of an incident here. I've got somebody knocking at my door. Vice Mayor Geringer, would you please take this for a second?
I'm happy to. And so when she comes back, so I don't know, Angie, the statistics right now, but we can check on that. And it's probably very similar to the overall in the city, which is interesting that 11% where 5% nationally. So thank you for sharing that. On the census, I, in my day job, worked on that for the county, and all the things that you talked about. Vice Mayor Kendall's gone, I'll tell her offline, but all the things that you talked about in terms of language barrier. One of the areas too was in terms of the numbers that you talked about, and then the percentages related to immigration. This go around, there was just a lot of distrust as well. And so there were, the census did everything they could to, and at the county level, we had good results because we did a lot of outreach, and just like you said, having trusted messengers who were able to speak to people in their language in their neighborhoods because they knew them or they were calling them. So trust, I would add to that issue. One of the questions, first of all, thank you very much. This is an amazing presentation. And my daughter, who's 25, a year ago started a group, an anti-racism, now I'm going to forget. Anyway, an anti-racism, basically a group of us from around the country who are trying to do the education part. So educating ourselves so that we can, really understand. And so I have been, through her prompting, reading a lot of material, and so knew some of this, but learned lots of new things. So thank you very much. And how we move forward. So one of the things you had on your action item was to provide community resources in support of AAPI communities. And so I was curious what do those resources look like? because I'm glad we're starting with the education and the conversation and the dialogue and incorporating this in our work. And I'm just curious what those other resources would be.
So it's really hard to answer that question, but I personally would love to see it as in parallel to any work that we do in diversity and inclusion. I think specifically for the AAPI community, I had thought about schools, of course.
Sure.
I think some way of really having zero tolerance on slurs, like anti-Asian American slurs is super hurtful, just like we have policy around other types of slurs, which are super hurtful. I think education, I know Camp Lindo had something recently for their students, which was great. It's, you know, to create a safe environment for children to talk about their experiences or people to talk about their experiences. Again, this whole notion of underreporting, I can tell you that when I got my degree 5 gazillion years ago, I am really glad that I think I am seeing more activity and more awareness and more acknowledgement of what the AAPI community experiencing now more than ever.
Right.
Okay. And we know that, you know, a lot of that is contributed to what has happened in the past year. So it's fantastic. Now we're just scratching the surface, and you know, some of the issue is I think there's just a lot of pent up anger and fear, and the fact that we're even allowing people to talk about it. I mean, I thank you guys for allowing me to talk about it today.
Yeah, thank you.
Really
Thank
fantastic. My son is sitting here listening. See, there he is. Take it back to his school at Stanley. And I think just creating a safe space and acknowledging the uniqueness and acknowledging really some of the difficulties and hurt that all this violence has created. What I didn't put up and I was really searching for is I read an article where somebody says, when I watch a video of the man being shoved down to the cement ground, I see my grandfather. I literally see, I think everybody sees their grandfather, but if they actually look exactly like their grandfather who's innocently just happens to be, you know, an Asian American, and of course, I don't know if it's being categorized a hate crime yet, but that's the emotional reaction that you have. That is literally the emotional reaction that you have. I'm scared, I'm angry, I am not safe, right?
Right.
So we're moving in the right direction. Like I said, it's really along the same path as all the work that you guys are doing in diversity and inclusion. But when you do it for the AAPI community, really look at the stats, look at who we are. That is the important next step to it. And I think we're all going in the right direction in terms of what we're doing for the communities of color. Yeah. Does that make sense? So I don't.
Absolutely. And I know it's not putting you on the spot and having you come up with all the solutions. I really very much appreciate the opening of this dialogue and the time that you put into, you know, the presentation and to helping to educate us and to open the conversation, the lines even more. I appreciate you coming to the task force, and we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end of the meeting and next steps. And so, yeah, just very important discussion that we continue.
Yeah, it goes a long way. Look, silence is hurtful. Silence, especially when you're angry, scared, fearful, feeling violated. Silence is hurtful. And I think we've taken a huge step allowing the Asian American communities to express their anger, right?
Right. And if I could just add one more thing, as I was having a little bit. So in my day job at the county, so the County Board of Supervisors on Tuesday had passed a resolution and I want to make sure it's not in support, but in support of the Asian Pacific Islander community, and basically talking about xenophobia of any kind. And so they passed that resolution, and beginning next year, in addition to the African American month and Martin Luther King Day celebrations and the Cesar Chavez whose birthday was today, and there will be a lunar celebration next year in honor and lifting up the cultural contributions of the community. So we are beginning to act too late, probably in many ways, but I think that we are moving the conversation forward. And so I appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, stay on. We have public comment. Maybe somebody will have a question for you. So Jeff, do we have any public comment?
We do, Mayor Candell. We have 2 hands raised. I'll just remind folks to use the raise hand function or *9. We now have 3 hands raised. And the first in is Michael Cass, who's joining the meeting now.
Hello.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for continuing to have these discussions. As I've said at each of the previous meetings, I think it's really important, and I offer nothing but appreciation to all of you for your time this evening putting this on. I especially want to extend an appreciation to Mrs. Zenner. Thank you for facilitating your presentation tonight. The last 2 meetings, last week's and tonight's, were a little bit more personal than some of the meetings have been in the past. And I think it's a really nice touch, and I hope that you continue to do this going forward. And it's been really educational as well. So thank you for everyone, and you particularly, Angie, thank you very much for that. Vice Mayor Geringer, you actually spoke to moments ago what I was going to raise this evening. I think one of the important things is actually having some tangible actions that can occur so that we can start to address some of the problems that are in our community locally and nationally as well. I think it would be a really pertinent step for the City Council to take in the near future to adopt a resolution in support of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, particularly in light of the ill treatment that has been happening and that is happening, at least getting reported on higher levels at this point. In the email that I sent a couple of weeks ago, I did provide an example. It sounds like there's another example with Contra Costa. So really the effort is to not create a huge burden or lift on staff time, but it really is important to continue to draw attention to this. And I say that because while these meetings have been really great, one of the concerns that I have is a lot of the focus and discussion is been with people that are already open to being more inclusive. And I think one of the challenges that we have collectively is how do you reach people that are on the fence or maybe don't think there's an issue, but helping them understand that there are some of these issues. And so I think it would be really great, probably not this evening, but at a future meeting, to have some discussion, because I think this is an area that's been lost and we're not necessarily drawing attention to the great work that this group is doing, is how the word can get out a little bit better and reaching more people than it has. So it's something that I hope that will be looked into going forward. Thank you.
Great, excellent point. Any questions? We are working on a resolution. So that is coming. Thank you. And thank you for sending your ideas in. And it's a great idea. You're right. We do need to reach more people.
All right. Next up, Mayor Candell, is Nick Warnoff.
Good evening again. I sincerely appreciate that we are having this discussion tonight. I have spent a great deal of time studying this subject, which has been one of the few benefits of having to stay at home due to COVID. And despite all my study, I did learn some things from the detailed presentation. I do, however, have one issue with the presentation, and in particular, the beginning segment that ran through the various hate incidents. in all of the early hate incidents that were recounted, they were written in the passive voice, which is always a red flag to me. And it seems that the presenter went out of her way not to mention the race or any demographic information about the perpetrators. And then when we got to the last two anecdotes, the race of the people involved being white people was specifically called out. And I think that as a result of that presentation, which I would describe as distorted, it creates the false impression that the hate incidents against the Asian American community, which I deplore, are entirely or primarily hate incidents committed by white people. And from what I have read, that is not what the data shows. That is my comment on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, everybody is allowed to have their own opinions. Angie, do you want to comment, or you do not have to? Does anyone have any questions of the speaker?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that could be the impact and the impression of the presentation. That wasn't my intention to represent any stats on the perpetrators.
Appreciate that. Do you have any more public comment?
Yes, there is. So we have Eunice joining the meeting now.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So my name is Eunice McHugh, and my family and I moved to Lafayette just a few months ago. I reached out to, I think, most of you via email a few weeks ago. So the increase in violence against Asians in our country and here in the Bay Area have really impacted me personally as an Asian American. I certainly worry about my parents as well as the safety of our own family and the other Asian Americans, especially the elderly in our community. I do think another reason why Asian Americans, or even just Asians, underreport hate crimes is because we are afraid about what the repercussions could be, meaning could it lead to additional violence against us. I am glad to see that the city of Lafayette is working to improve its diversity and inclusion efforts. As an Asian American, I know that I am a minority in the city where the residents are predominantly white. While my husband is white, I believe I am one of the very few minorities on my street. My children are not at the school age yet, but as we do get settled here, I am worried about them experiencing racism, especially by their peers or others in the community, especially with an increase in xenophobia. This would obviously break my heart as their mother, just given their innocence and their inability to comprehend how anyone could dislike them because of their heritage. I personally have experienced racism. I've seen my parents experience it here. You know, the community, while there have been folks in our neighborhood that have been very friendly, there have been some that unfortunately have not been. And so as a minority, you naturally start to think, is it because of my race? I'm not sure. It's difficult to prove, right? But I agree with what Michael Cass had said earlier. I think there needs to be efforts made to reach those who are not involved in the diversity and inclusion efforts that are being done. I did attend the meeting last week, and I was very impressed with how much has been done. So I really commend you all for the efforts that have been done here. I really do hope that the city continues to make this a priority, just because even if we don't see anything in the headlines, right, I do think this is an issue that needs to be prioritized. But as a new community member, I am thankful for all the work that you guys have done here, and please keep up the work. You know, it's definitely appreciated by our family. So thank you.
Oh, so lovely. Thank you for coming on and speaking tonight, and welcome to Lafayette.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
let's make us as good as we possibly can.
Yes.
All right. Any questions for the speaker? No. Thank you.
Eunice, that so my kids are in Lafayette schools. It's really lovely for the most part, and I do acknowledge what you're saying and your fear. And I can tell you that there are many Asian American parents talking about those issues and their fear, and they want to do something about it, and they also want to continue the discussion. So.
Okay, Mayor Kandel, we have Susie Pack, who's joining the meeting now.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to call in and say thank you to Angie for all the work that went into that presentation. It's probably like another dissertation, but that was terrific. I serve on the Lafayette School Board, and I too have been affected personally by the anti-Asian violence that has now come to mainstream media, and people are starting to notice. And I wanted to the question that was raised before about why have anti-Asian crimes been underreported. I think a lot of it, at least from personal experience, also is cultural. It's looking at our history and my family's history, coming to this country, most everybody, came over to work or to add value. They were looked at, they were given exception. I mean, there were rules keeping Asians out of this country, and they were only allowed in if they could add value to this country. And so in doing so, they were brought over for a specific purpose and wanted to provide a better life for their family, either here or back in their country of origin. And I think that mindset carries forward a lot today, especially, I'm the daughter of two immigrant parents, and I know that that's what it was like for them, and that's what it was like for me. And there's a culture of shame that I experienced where, we were taught or encouraged to just assimilate and just to blend in and not to draw attention to yourself and not to make trouble and to just study hard, do well, add value. So I wanted to thank the city for making this a priority. I think the more we can talk about this, the more we can normalize these kinds of discussions. I know that we at the school district are fiercely committed to doing the same, whether it's with our parents, with our staff, but especially with our students. So I also wanted to, say to Eunice, the last speaker, that when your children are ready to come to our schools, it will be even better than it is today. The amount of time and effort and energy, resources that we are committed to spending and doing for our students, because if we can do this with our youngest citizens, it will only make this town better, and in turn will only make the world a better place. I know that sounds very cliche, but I really believe that. My daughter, who is an Acalanes, participated in the Zoom meeting that was hosted, I think, 2 weeks ago for high school students and staff.
And we've hit 3 minutes.
Okay.
Wrap it up, Susie. You
Anyway,
can finish up.
I just wanted to say that when kids feel heard, when they can find their voices at a young age, things will only get better. So we owe it to ourselves and to our youngest residents of this town to continue this work, and it will pay off in spades. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that wasn't corny at all. Actually, I was getting a little teary. Yeah. Thank you, Susie, so much. Vice Mayor Geringer.
So I just want to thank Susie for coming on and for attending every one of these meetings and just being so candid and open. And also to note that it's not like you don't have 100 meetings that you've been attending, trying to get school back open. And so I just really appreciate you partnering and the school district being with us in this work as well, or us being with you, whichever the case may be.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Susie.
All right, hands are being raised and lowered. So I'll just remind folks, if you do wish to speak, go ahead and use the raise hand function, leave it up, and we will get to you. Don't take your hand down, and it just makes things go a lot slower. So coming up next is Lynn McMichael.
Lynn, you're muted. Lynn, please. Oh, there you go.
I was trying to change that, sorry.
That's okay.
Good evening, everybody. I want to echo Eunice and Michael Cass in thanking all of you so much, and for Angie and that wonderful presentation. I'd like to get though down to two things about what we can specifically do. I did not know about the Holaback organization, and a number of us through the Quakers and the American Friends Service Committee have done nonviolent training around various issues over time. And I think that would be a wonderful way that we could physically go and aid, step up and see how we can help that organization. So thank you for that. And I wondered, given the astounding impact that Black Lives Matter gathering in the city of Lafayette, where we had, I bet you there were 4,000 people. That was so moving, and I was so touched by it. And I thought perhaps, and I'm not laying this on the city for you people to do one more thing, but perhaps a few of us who've been at these last couple of meetings can come together and try and make our feelings visible in downtown by calling people together like was done with the Black Lives Matter, and say we want every Asian American and Asian person to know that Lafayette citizens are with you. So I'll contact Michael and a few others, and we'll see if we can get something off the ground. Thank you very much. Good night.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That sounds terrific. Vice Mayor Geringer.
Well, I see there aren't any other hands. I was going to add this at the end. I don't know if very many people were able to attend because it was put on very quickly by Assemblymember Bauer Cahan last night at 5 o'clock. And Holaback is the group that led the work. And so I will echo that as much as we can have that. And I think we've talked about it in our emails with different constituents about having the ally training and that training to be able to respond. And so yesterday it was Asian Law Caucus and Holaback that put it on. And there again, I was able to learn things that, and to also learn that I'm not the only one who wonders how to help in those situations. So I agree with Lynn about, trying to make sure we provide that train, whoever we might be at some point, but that we provide that training.
That sounds great. And thank you, Lynn. I encourage you to do what you are offering to do. Get the word out big and wide. All right, any more speakers?
No more speakers at this time.
Okay, so Angie, I cannot thank you enough. I learn so much from you every time we speak, as always, and appreciate you in Lafayette and bringing this to us in a very beautiful way. And we will do our best to support you.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you so much for listening. It really feels nice to present what I think is information for all of you guys who are enthusiastic about the work and think it's important, whether you're personally impacted by it or not. I think we all care. I think there are nuances, right? And I do want to say to Susie, I heard great things about that meeting at the school for the high school students. I would love to see that continue because I think even an hour of students just speaking to themselves or expressing goes a long way. So I really encourage that to continue. And I will be on point if anyone wants any further information. I do a lot of research in this area.
It shows. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Take care. All right. So now we'll go to an update on the task force work plan.
Good evening. I'm going to present that today. So as I shared out at the meeting last week, The task force has been meeting since July of 2020. And over the series of meetings and town hall events that we've had, we've heard the stories of different individuals impacted in our community. We've collected suggestions to form an action plan, and we've shared tools for how to respond to uncomfortable situations. With regard to staff, all city staff have now been trained on implicit bias. We have been working to evaluate our hiring practices, and we also worked with to bring council a resolution excuse me, that reaffirms the city's commitment to being a welcoming, inclusive, tolerant, and safer community for all. And then, as you heard from Chief Ben Aldrett earlier in this meeting, the Public Safety Subcommittee has been working on implementing recommendations regarding police training and reporting. Lastly, actually it's not lastly now, but the General Plan Advisory Committee has taken suggestions from the work that we've done over from the recommendations and suggestions we've heard from community members, and they're working on incorporating those comments into their discussions around housing and land use. So I think that what we've heard, we've tried to integrate into the city's core work as best as we can. And then with regard to the meeting that we had last week on March 23rd, we had several individuals volunteer to participate on a community committee. Right now, just in trying to refer to it, I'm calling it the Community Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. But of course, that group may change their name. Tomorrow, this week, I'll be sending out an email to all of those volunteers and working with them to try and get a date set for our first meeting. And I think that this is really the group, as Michael Cass asked about, finding ways to have tangible actions. I think that this committee will be really successful in putting a louder voice out in the community about what we're trying to achieve here.
Wow, sounds perfect. Yes. Oh, thank you so much. And as always, I just have to say, Lafayette, we are blessed with a staff that is not only capable of doing it, but they really are wanting to do it and supportive. And that does not happen in all cities. Do not take this for granted. We are so fortunate to have Narup and Jennifer and Ben and everybody else doing this. This is not happening in all cities, and it's fantastic. So thank you for your update. Teresa, do you have, Vice Mayor Gehring, did you have any questions? Okay.
Just
all right.
Thanks.
Absolutely. All right. So do you want to take public comment on that? I guess, yeah. Okay. So agenda item, public comment on the work plan update.
All right. No hands are raised right now, but we'll give folks a second if they do want to comment on this item. All right. Back to you, Mayor Kandel.
All right. So now,
Mayor Kandel?
Yes, please.
May I add a suggestion? I believe
you're breaking up a little bit. You're breaking up.
I'm going to turn my video off.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to I know we're bringing a resolution to the next meeting, but Council Member Anduri pointed out that May is AAPI Heritage Month. And whether I'm just offering this so that you as a committee could recommend to the full council that we could put a banner up in our banner box celebrating that in early May. If you support that, I would suggest that you bring it up at the next council meeting.
So bring up the banner box at the next meeting. Okay. Will do.
Thank you.
So next we want to have a debrief from our Lafayette Diversity Information Night last week. Our highly successful, meeting last week was amazing. So how do we want to lead this debrief? Jennifer, do you want to show the wonderful word cloud?
Sure, let me pull it up real quick. Maybe one, Teresa or Susan, you might walk through the exercises that we did.
Right. So last week it was a very invigorating and emotional kind of night, and so we have had a wonderful new facilitator, Lene McFadder-Harris, who has been working a lot with the schools, a Lafayette parent, and is actually an expert. She does this for her job. And she works for Evident Change, and she came on and facilitated. And she facilitated through breakout rooms to answer questions like, how do we create what we want here in Lafayette? And we leaded with our top 3 words, and all of the groups went out in their breakout rooms and came back. And so what it's like, basically we were trying to reimagine, what does equity and inclusion, look like in Lafayette? So first off, this is the values that we kind of attribute to our, we kind of describe Lafayette. And these were the words that, in the 3 words that were coming back from the breakout words, the biggest ones were the ones that came back the most times from these groups. And this is not necessarily where we want to be. This was more of how we kind of imagine ourselves now. And I thought that it was good. It was honest. Some of the words were probably words we want to maybe improve upon. Actually, without a doubt, we want to be better at. Insular is not a great word. Status quo is probably not a word that many of us want to keep, running into our future, but they are important. And that's where we have to know where we are in order to be able to move forward, to be more equitable and inclusive. And then the next breakout session was, what would Lafayette look like and feel like and be in 10 years if we were to achieve a community that was more equitable and inclusive? What would that look like and feel? And this is the part where Lene really shines. I mean, she pushes us, and she pushed all of us to be super thoughtful and really take it to heart. And some of those answers were really great. I don't know, Jennifer, if you were able to get we weren't able to put those together in real time, like the word cloud, but some of the things, open and authentic, an experience of belonging, a lack of pretense, meet people where they are, dismantle white supremacy, values trust and progress. And one that I thought was really cool is, you can be your authentic self and feel safe, valued, celebrated, and at home. So in 10 years, if we could have everybody in our community feel that way and really achieve that, we've done something really amazing in Lafayette. So those are the kind of things that we came out with. We then kind of looked forward to next steps. And it's always been our vision that this task force wasn't going to be the leader on this effort. We are absolutely supportive. We want to do everything we possibly can. But on council, our council isn't the right entity probably to be pushing us in the directions we need to go. And so we did solicit for community members to reach out and to volunteer to lead a community-led group that would hopefully lead this effort with our help, with fabulous Jennifer Wakeman as our staffer, organizing and facilitating and enabling in all those other words. And we will as well. But if we can launch something that off the ground, that would be, to me, would be a success. And so those are the names that we have. I think that we have 11 people that volunteered. Yeah, 11 people that are, and these are the names that are on that list. They're serious. They are the people in our community that are capable and willing to lead right now. I know there's a lot of people out there that are busy. That are tapped out. There's so much work going on, through the schools, through, everything on these efforts. But then to find 11 people that don't feel tapped out, that still feel like that they can contribute, we're very hopeful that can hopefully lead us into the future. And if anybody on these calls, if you want to be part of that group, please, again, reach out, me, Teresa, Jennifer, Narup, we'll get you in touch with this. So that's kind of a synopsis. I don't know. So Vice Mayor Gehring, did you want to add?
Nope, very well done. And some of the
Right.
people who did volunteer are on the call tonight. So thank you again. And Jennifer did in her task force plan update say that you'll be hearing in the next couple of days so that we can move that work forward. So thanks. No, Mayor, you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So Jennifer or Narup, do you have anything to add on that? Okay. All right. So do we have any public comment on that?
No public comment.
Okay. So
sorry, I spoke too soon. All right, one hand is raised. I will remind folks if they do want to provide comment to go ahead and put all those hands up right now. We'll take them in the order we got them. And first up is Nick Warnoff from Orinda.
Hi again. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this discussion. Perhaps the mayor could explain to us her understanding of the difference in meaning between the word equity that she uses and the word equality. Thank you.
Okay, so we went over this ages ago. Equity is more. You can give equal opportunity to people, but if they, so the equal opportunity is good, but if somebody is starting out so far behind or has so many other issues and around it, that's still not equitable. And I that's the way that I interpret it, is that equity is harder. You really have to meet people where they are to make sure that they're getting what they need, because not all of us come from the same place. And that applies to, pretty much every piece of our lives. And that's how I interpret equity, is that we're going the extra mile to make sure that everybody is getting what the services that they need, or the response that they need and the treatment they need, based on where they are. So any other public comment?
Yes, we do. We have Craig D, who's going to be joining the meeting as I push this button.
Hello, Craig. I don't see you.
Well, he should be there, but I don't know what happened. Let's see where he ended up. Looks like he may have dropped out.
No, he's
he's there
now.
It just showed up. All right.
Please unmute yourself, Craig.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for the delay. For some reason, when I'm rejoining, it's spinning and all that. But I just want to say that I'm really appreciative of what I'm learning through this meeting tonight. And as a resident of Lafayette, I think I'm white, okay? So I guess I got to come clear with that. I've heard I'm part of the 97%. I haven't done a 23andMe or I've been told I'm a quarter Blackfoot Indian and I should apply for some things. But, that aside, I'm looking for practical ways for our community, especially with Miss, I think her name was
Zener.
Mm-hmm. How do we engage with community members that are impacted in negative ways without seeming patronizing? I really am feeling from these discussions and these meetings that we do need work, and we can all help each other through this. So as we go through these things, there's just a couple of things I'd like to just say. Let's find ways for the people that we're categorized as being in this town, me being, I think, white, like I said, 97%. How do we do this without feeling, like, oh, you're white and you just care because you're, I don't know, you have a house that's big or something. I want to square that away. And the other thing I'd like to ask is we be very careful how we use the term white supremacy. I firmly believe in this community that it may exist. If it does, we're going to root it out together. It should be gone forever. But to leverage our agendas, whoever is speaking, by using that term diminishes the capability that we can bring to bear for the greater good. Some of us are white, and how long will it take before we are diminished and feel like we have to fight back? And then it becomes an unending, cycle of who's on top. That's aside.
All right, and we have hit 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Sorry it took so long. I didn't believe I could take that much time. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and so when I comment, these were comments that were made by groups that that were in our breakout group last week, and I know it's a powerful term, and we're all seeing it, and that's the process. I mean, I think you nailed the hardest part of this whole process. So thank you. We have a lot of work to do. Okay. So any more public comment?
No more public comment, Mayor Candell.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any other, Vice Mayor Geringer, any other actions? So thank you, everybody. Once again, these meetings they're fabulous and thoughtful. And I hope everyone feels safe, that this is a safe place to express how you feel on all sides of every issue. That's what this is all about, is equity and inclusion for everyone. So thank you, everybody. And I'll adjourn the meeting.